My name is Emily Moses, and I'm volunteering as your session moderator. Thank you for joining this Zoom meeting session. I Was Here, a vision to shift the spirit of the country. We invite you to turn on your camera if you are comfortable and able to join with video. To minimize background noise, we ask that everyone stay on mute when not talking. If you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand feature inside the participants tab. You're also invited to submit your questions via chat in the Zoom screen, and we will address those throughout the session. If you are having any tech or connectivity issues with the event software, we suggest utilizing the Chrome browser or using the direct Zoom meeting invite, which is in the session description. Now I'm pleased to turn this session over to Marshall Fields, Patrick Mitchell, and Marjorie Guyon.
Excellent and outstanding. Hello, everyone. We all want to thank you all. We're honored to be here. Emily will be, I think she already said it, she'll be facilitating the questions, and please feel free to ask questions throughout this presentation, okay? And we'll also be collecting them and making sure that we address them at the end. So here we have this lovely building in Lexington. Cozy and beautiful dining area, includes heating if it gets chilly on days when you're sitting outside. And it sits across from the courthouse. Directly in front of where it's sitting was once the largest auction site of enslaved persons in the country. Although internal slave trade in the United States was one of the largest forced dislocations of a people, of a culture in the world, so many people walk around these largely relevant and commemorative places of history, and they hide in plain sight.
So this project began in 2016, and it started with a conversation that spanned several weeks about the lives and history of Black Americans and the need to shift the spirit of the country. One day, as we were talking, I looked out the window of my studio and saw mother and child appearing in the window surrounding the old courthouse. I was with my friend that we had started the conversation. I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I just had a vision of mothers and children appearing and disappearing." She said, "Let's do it." That's who you see in these photographs, the friend who started the conversation with her little boy. This project has been collaborative from the start, and it has grown organically in the past 4 years. So I reached out to poet Nikki Finney once I had the initial images, and she is an amazing poet who's devoted her life's work to justice. And she said it shouldn't only be mothers and children. It should be the scope of humanity. Nikki came to Lexington and we walked the square and sat across the street in my studio. Before she left, I gave her the photograph that you see on the screen. It is a picture that was on the wall in my grandmother's house. I've seen it ever since I was little. I don't actually exactly know who he is, but I think he's my great-grandfather. So I gave Nikki the picture and she looked at me like, "Why are you giving me this?" And weeks later we were on the phone and we realized that this was going to be an Ancestor Spirit project, that my ancestor had gone home with her. So it is, I believe, it's the spirit of the ancestors that are in the lead in this project, that we have not been alone in the making, and that those spirits have guided us. And it was them who were made apparent on the square surrounding the old courthouse.
Patrick Mitchell, the photographer, and Marjorie came to me. I was in 2018, I was shooting an event. I was shooting the annual Martin Luther King March, and she told me she had an idea and she needed to talk to me. And a few days later we met and we talked, and I loved the idea and I got it right away. And we went around the town and we looked at people and we felt ideas, and we decided to bring everybody together in an audition and have those models come together so we can see if they can give us what we were looking for in this project. The ancestors needed to be people they can look at that were human and not property, you might say. And that was very important to us. Not a lot of data as far as the our art process of it. And we wanted to make sure that these pictures were going to be going around the square and in Lexington, around the courthouse. But the auditions went well, and these are the models that we came up with.
So myself, I arrived as a model, nothing more, you know, something to be seen and not heard, something to have my photograph captured and displayed. But when I learned the significance about the project, you know, after I knew the baseline concept, I had to be a part of it. That's pretty much the only reason that we're talking right now, because it was so crucial and so important based upon the state of the country as it is now, and as it was when this first started some years ago. So this is my daughter. We were in an environment that welcomed discussion of race in both past and current tense, especially in diverse company. And so humans can be so afraid of situations that require them to admit that they understand that they don't understand. I saw an incredible opportunity to represent the humanity of my ancestors, those that had been documented, as well as those that had not been documented, based upon how we got here in the country. And so the fact that my daughter here is an entryway into my personal life that I was happy to share based upon the meaning of the project.
The idea, the ancestors, the spirit of this project is to bring the voices of minimalized people forward as what's happening today. So the spirit of the project is already moving across the country, I believe. And those voices are being heard.
I agree 100%. The environment was such that collaboration was easy and encouraged. Inviting and encouraging the melting pot of America, this is the same sentiment that needs to be embraced across the country, to have open dialogue.
As an artist, I'm also an actor, director, producer of plays. I've been in films, and I've been acting for over 40 years. And my approach to the auditions and to the models or actors was to give them a backstory that they can go off of, and to create the look that we were looking for in their eyes. It was important that they connected, and as in acting, you would connect with your actor, you would connect with the audience, and these eyes, it was important that they were either looking at the people going by on the streets, letting them know that I was here, I am here, and I will be here, as you would in acting when you're talking to somebody on stage. They have to connect. Connectivity is very important in art for me, and especially but when I'm behind the camera. In our discussions, we talked about key factors like in the spirit figures, wardrobe, hairstyles. The wardrobe didn't have, it had to be timeless. It couldn't have a lot of information on it, a lot of data. So that was very important. And it was important that, especially with the way Marjorie directed me in it, that they couldn't be broken. They had to be strong and beautiful, and they could not be broken. And we gave them all a backstory, and they gave us exactly what you're seeing today.
Part of the backstory I remember Patrick mentioning was he asked me, if you were your great-great-great-grandfather looking through a portal in time at you now, what would your face look like? That was so powerful. You know, a concept that I never really even think of, but we are our ancestors' ambassadors. And they say to us, you are not alone. I will call you. We will find one another. Having nothing and having left the only place we have known as home, we will find one another. We will find our way to the cities of light. And this project was a part of that for me. So, being a very private person in nature, nothing is more personal to me than both my family and my belief system. Sharing both of these within the project has been an incredible three-way intersection of considering who we were, who we are, and who we could be. Ancestors become real. They are great-grandparents, grandparents, fathers, brothers, sons. And I can recall several times being in the company of someone who did not have my same ethnic background and hearing them talk. For example, a friend of mine, he was wearing a kilt. And he told me the history of the kilt. He went back 5 different generations. I don't have that luxury.
So Patrick and I were brainstorming the night actually before we were doing the photo shoot and trying to figure out how we could have these people look timeless. And finally, I mean, we talked about it for hours and came up with the idea of that the women would wear a shawl. And so what was so interesting was that by the time we finished the photo shoot, everyone, with the exception of one, everyone was wearing a shawl. The men were wearing shawls, the women were wearing shawls. And I believe that it was a form of comfort. It was a way to be covered when we were talking about these kinds of things. But you'll see shawls through the entire project. So a little bit about me. I've always worked in collage, and what is collage but basically laying one thing on top of the other, much like the way that our memories are layered. The finished original pieces are a synthesis of photography with paintings layered over and under the images, and then insinuated as well is Nikki Finney, the poet, wrote a poem for the project. So some of the language from her poem is in many of the pieces, as well as language for a prayer that came along later. So this is a layering of many different, it's a synthesis of many ideas that come together as one. So initially what we thought was that this was going to be a Central Kentucky project. And Nikki had called me early on and she said, Marjorie, numbers are very important. I want you to put numbers into the project. And so the way that I thought about bringing numbers into the project was latitude and longitude. And initially we thought this is going to be about Kentucky, and Kentucky is landlocked. But while I was working on this image, this young man felt to me like he was both rising and falling at the same time. And the more I worked on him, the more blue he became. And what did I realize? Which was that we had found the ocean. And the project took us to the Middle Passage. So I talked to Nikki and Patrick about it and said, like, we are not in Central Kentucky anymore. And they both said, I think, Patrick will remember, but I think they said, this is okay. I researched and found out that the highest mountain range on the entire earth is under the water where the boats would have passed between Africa and America. And I shared this with Nikki and she said, I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to tell you because it pertains so deeply to what you're drawing and saying here. We don't know how many Africans were forced across during the slave trade.
Is it 10 million? Or is it 60 million enslaved souls and more? as Toni Morrison wrote. Whatever the number is, a very high percentage would have rather been jumped or pushed into the ocean rather than arriving on the coast and being sold at Cheapside. In fact, so many perished on the way that sharks would follow the ships because they knew that there would be something thrown over. So this is the under-Atlantic world. Highest mountain range on the earth is the resting place, or perhaps up and over the mountains beneath the sea, spirits traveled back home. The project is a way to create a visual for American history. So as Marjorie said, latitude and longitude is woven into the pieces of the project. It crosses the world, referencing the Bight of Benin, the Igbo Landing on St. Simon's Island in Georgia, or the Broeck Race Course, which you may have heard of in the story of the Weeping Time. If not, Google the Weeping Time. And that was in Savannah, where the largest two-day sale of enslaved persons occurred, as well as other physical locations have been woven in that are central to the long and lucrative life of the transatlantic slave trade across the Middle Passage.
So something that we haven't talked about yet is that there are no signatures in the entire body of this work. When the original pieces were completed, we decided to sign each of them by thumbprint. And we had a signing ceremony. And everybody gathered actually at this really pretty nice restaurant. And they put out in this fancy restaurant little plates of paint. And you can see in these pictures, that's actually me with Iris, Marshall's daughter, and Nikki in process of signing the pieces. So there's an anonymity built into the images, which ties to the idea of these iconic ancestor spirit portraits. So, an on-the-street museum. How actually do you do something like this? Because that was the idea of the project. It was to take art out of what you could call the citadel, like museum, art gallery, university, and bring it onto the street so that you would have regular people coming into contact with these spirit portraits every day. So first we had to discover the medium. How do you do this? And through a series of accidents, which like there have been accidents through this entire project, we found that it would be possible to reproduce the images on translucent fabric. So the translucency of the fabric allows for light to come through. The medium itself becomes part of the placemaking work. So allowing the images, allowing light to come through the images lets them be viewed from the street and in the interior space. So what you see here is one of the initial tapestries and then one of the designs for how to install these into windows.
So whether you are on the outside looking in or on the inside looking out, you can see them from both sides. It creates a visual metaphor. We have to look at this from both sides. In this day and age of polarization, of binary thought, yes or no, black or white, you have to look from the inside out. That has empathy written into it. All right, so you have to reveal it to heal it. Although this project is launched in Kentucky, the repercussions of slavery are not merely a Southern issue. It is a national wound that we as fellow Americans must heal. We are all personally responsible for becoming more ethical than the society that we grew up in.
So the same way that the project started with a vision of mother and child, one morning I realized we needed a prayer, And we should have a sanctification ceremony to become part of the project that would bless the actual places where these crimes against humanity occurred. So Barry Burton, who is actually Patrick's cousin, was first a model in the project. He then became the project installation manager. And having gone with him to do all these installations, what I noticed that even though, see, every single person in the downtown, everyone that was asked said yes to having their windows used, but you can say yes and not be happy about it. And we went into a lot of spaces that were not friendly. And he, as the installation person, he never got shook by it. And so when I realized we need a prayer, I asked him, would you consider writing a prayer for this? And he said, I have to pray about it. And he came back and he said, yes, I would. So this has been a project of transformation from the outset, affording those of us who have been lucky enough to be connected to it, the ability to see ourselves and the world in new ways.
Mary Quinn Raymer, president of Visit Lex, the city's tourism office, was a financial sponsor to I Was Here. And she said as she was speaking to us one day, the project team, she was talking about the division tearing the country apart, and that also included racism. She said, we kept thinking there has got to be a different way for us to have a conversation. She went on to say, I Was Here is something that really serves as a national template and a cue to any community to finish telling the rest of the story in a way that allows everyone to bring their humanity to the discussion.
So one of our partners in this project, and there are many, is the Lexington Public Library. And this is actually Barry on a ladder. And these are two installations in two branches of the Lexington Public Library. So you can see, you can see how we're bringing art into these public spaces. And now for our launch at the library, we have a wonderful school of music, actually School of Opera here in Lexington, and some of the opera singers put together a performance for the launch of our library installation. And so we had opera singers on 5 floors of the library with their voices going into the rotunda, and it was pretty amazing.
The launch of the Lexington Public Library, the opera, was phenomenal. And then history, geography, image into the public space. The installation brings together two key partners. I Was Here in the Lexington Public Library. I Was Here as an organization is far more than the creator of the artwork. It is the driving force bringing the project into new communities and pushing forward, achieve to desired spiritual as well as artistic outcomes. The Lexington Public Library occupies not only a place on the city's street map, but also in the minds and hearts of the community as a unifying institution that belongs to everybody.
So consider desegregation through art. People have told me that they saw these images in restaurants and bar windows, and they felt comfortable to come in. So if they felt comfortable to come in after seeing these, that might mean that they didn't feel comfortable before. Consider desegregation through art. If racism is systematic, then we need a systematic way to take it apart. This project is a strategic and historically accurate approach to bringing a visual into view. Citizens get to come face to face with a history lesson rarely, if ever, experienced on the streets of America. Bringing history to life requires that we bring it to where the people are. There isn't a state or city in America where this project cannot find a home. The one goal being that we reframe our citizenship through conversations that lead us to opportunities of interaction that lead us to engagement versus exclusion.
We received the Historic Preservation Organization Bluegrass Trust Award. I'm not surprised. I was here, it's getting so much attention on a national level because the team has done a wonderful job promoting this project. I Was Here has tapped into the spirits and they are taking it where it needs to go. There has been some obstacles, but when one door closes, another opens. I don't see how it can't get to other places around the country.
So something amazing happened and we won a national award from the American Association of State and Local Histories. And Ashley and I, this photo is of Ashley and I in Philadelphia where we went to receive the award. And we met, see, this is the thing, I didn't understand that historians can be visionaries. And when we were in Philadelphia, I realized that historians, many of them are seeking to take the brokenness of the past to format a different kind of future. And getting the award introduced us to the idea of partnership with historians working around the country. Historians draw connections between the installations of the spirit portraits and the historical foundation of our country. As we engage with the true history of place, we're in a position to craft a path to a shift in how we see one another. So historians are key to us right now in that we can create a visual for things that are invisible on our daily landscape.
I mean, the reality is we live in a day and age of spin, right? You know, you can take one event and you can tell one side of the story to the people who already think that way and the other side of the story to the people who already think that way, and everybody's happy because you know what? You validated what they already thought. Well, history is incredible because it's fact. It's based on facts that occurred. Now, whether or not those facts have been historically shared, that's a different thing. But we can use it to help bring us together. And one of the ways is by creating public living rooms. Public art innovation requires that spaces be used by the many people that encounter each other on the streets that might be unaccustomed to living with art. So we create public living rooms in spaces that are open to all of the public, and more importantly, spaces where people who might never go into a museum or an art gallery or some other institution that has a lot of art, they might be able to visit this.
So right now, it's exciting. We're working on a walking tour that will integrate history, geography, performing arts, and image into an on-the-street museum. The start point of this tour will be the Lexington Public Library, the site of which was once a jail for the enslaved. So in a few weeks, there will be a set of 32 Ancestor Spirit Portraits, each 10 foot high, to mark this unmarked historic site, creating a memorial and a set of guardian figures in the heart of downtown.
So I've heard this term utilized a lot, the third rail. And, you know, it can be the third rail of any conversation, but in ours, it's the third rail of race. And so I've asked a few people. Some people know what it means, some people don't, so let me tell you. The third rail comes from a term from electric trains and subways. There are 3 rails, 2 of which you can touch perfectly fine. But if you touch the third one, you close the circuit, it will electrocute you and you die. So we take the discussion of racism, and in many times in politics and casual encounters, even between friends of different ethnicities, and it becomes a third rail. It is so dangerous to talk about. It'll kill you. So we create a situation through this project by which you can talk about it. You know, a topic shrouded in anger, sadness, and guilt. The depths of the wound of slavery that it created, they're definitely systematic. But the project affords us a way to acknowledge the unremitting truth of the past while planting a seed for the future. You know, this project, it shines as a beacon of light on the humanity of every father, mother, sister, brother, man, woman, and child. This is a vision of re-seeing the fundamental truth that we are all one humanity. These walking tours are based on the immutable facts of history and the history of every town and city that it goes into. The Ancestor Spirit Portraits, they create a memorial as well as a set of guardian figures, as Marjorie said. But they can be utilized in education, and relearning can happen with the collective start of sharing information at that point.
So this one's interesting. Well, first I want to say something about the thinking behind placing these pieces into public places. So I've spent my life mostly as an exhibition artist, and I showed, like every year I would have a show in Chelsea in New York, and I've spent decades adjusting the alchemy of image and color. I understand how the right piece shifts the spirit in a room. But what I began thinking about several years ago was, would it be possible to work on a form of public art with the intent to nourish a public with content and beauty? The thing that's so interesting about this particular site is that the business owners called us to see if they could become part of it. It turns out that the actual site this building is on was, again, another jail for the enslaved. There were shackles in the basement. We didn't know that when they called us, but we found it out. And I believe actually that the building itself called to us. So we have the hope that there will be a continual presence of these spirit figures surrounding historic courthouses and moving throughout cities. We're hoping that as these portraits become part of the public square, they will work to carve a path to a new shared understanding of humanity.
And sorry, anyone who might hear an echo when I was talking. So these images are located at the Winchester Sun Building, which faces the Clark County Courthouse in Kentucky. After slavery, the role of the courthouse became to legislate subjugation and deny the humanity and ultimately the citizenship of the former enslaved. If I had time, I would go through at least 25 laws that were created after Emancipation Proclamation that were strategic to continue the legacy of slavery, but now it was being litigated against people who are supposed to be citizens. And where'd that happen? It happened in the courthouses of America. Something to consider. And as we talk about things like this, to be acknowledged, we couldn't be more honored, because we're talking about topics that have, you know, in the past been historically taboo. But I believe there is an awakening that's taking place. And organizations like the National Endowment for the Arts giving us an award is one of the best acknowledgments of that awakening that we could have.
So we received an award from CodaWorks, which actually the award is sponsored by Interior Design Magazine. And they liked our project so much that they created a special category for us. And what's so interesting, they called it the budget category. So what's so interesting about this budget category award is that we, the team who made this project, believe so strongly in the power of it and in the power of public art. We were able to accomplish this with very little funding. How do we do this? The artists involved did not receive personal payment. This project was not commissioned by an art funder or a city. This project was commissioned by a young American citizen that asked for safe harbor. It was a request to shift the spirit of the country. This is $1 million project, yet it occurred without significant funding. And why? Because we were able to gather together with the understanding that the need is so urgent that those of us who understand that and who have spent our lives honing these different talents really have to come together and bring to this country, really bring to the world what we have. This is an all hands on deck time. So we have been very lucky to have been able to do what we've been able to do so far, and we have wonderful supporters, and we're so grateful to the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation for inviting us to come here today, Kentucky Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, Kentucky Endowment of Humanities, American Association of State and Local Histories, Wells Fargo, Lexington Public Libraries. The Visit and Convention Bureau here in Lexington, Visit Lex, was our very first supporter. The day that Patrick and I met, that we knew that we were going to be doing the photo shoot, Jackson Kelly, an attorney from them, we realized we need a contract for our people we were going to photograph. I called an attorney from Jackson Kelly and I said, we're going to need you. And he said, anything you need, we will give you. And they have been just our wonderful legal helpers from the get-go. And Greater Clark Foundation and Bluegrass Community Foundation brought us to Clark County, Kentucky.
In some cities, the Ancestor Spirit Portraits overlook government buildings. Here in Lexington, Kentucky, they look out from the government center. It's good to have the spirits in the house. And so we appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to listen to the project, listen to our passion, and just share some time with us. And now I want to ask Emily, do we have any questions that have been collected that we might be able to address or discuss with the audience?
We don't have any questions that have come into the chat yet, but if you have questions, either you can raise your hand and I will see that in the participants tab, or please feel free to pop into the chat and ask your questions. And if no one does, I actually have a question. I always have questions. One of the things that I would be interested in knowing, if Marjorie and Patrick could address this, how did you collaborate together? How did you work together to both do your artistic pieces that met the overall goal of the project? So what did that take?
Marjorie? Well, we spent a lot of hours together, riding around town, looking at buildings and gathering history. When it was time to shoot, she was right there. She assisted me while I shot, and she also guided me with what she was looking for. And we did everything. We made the atmosphere very comfortable for the actors and the auditionees. And as collaborators, once the images were done, I gave them to her and she took them. She kicked me out, but I totally understood. But we definitely spent a lot of time together.
So we actually do have some questions that are coming in now. Emily Prince, I'm gonna ask you to unmute if you want to ask your question.
Hello, thanks friend. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
So my question, or it's more of advice. We're working on a similar project in Nelsonville, Ohio, but the base of it is storytelling with a portraiture piece, where we're trying to work with someone to teach storytelling techniques and then record the stories of the people of their town, some of the people from whom their history in Nelsonville has been erased or whitewashed. And so I guess maybe sort of the really main thrust of the question I have is, I've been spending a lot of time doing a lot of planning, working with a lot of groups, a lot of listening, a lot of trying to get everybody to the community building table and trying to raise money and get all the funding first. So it sounds to me, based on this presentation, you went forward and then the funding followed a good project. Am I correct in that assessment, that you knew you had something and you went for it? Or did you try to get a lot of funding first?
Well, you have to remember that my entire career has been as an artist. And so the way that works is you create an exhibition and then it sells. And so I have never been in a situation where I was pre-funded for something. And basically I looked at this as a commission. It was an unpaid commission. So I knew that somebody was going to have to come forward and create funding for it. But I have spent my entire life as a grown-up without a salary, understanding that if what you create is powerful enough, someone will want to buy it. And that's exactly what's happened with us.
Pam Korza, I am going to ask you to unmute for your question.
Well, hi, everyone. First of all, I want to say this project is very, very powerful, and I appreciate so many dimensions of it. I love sort of your openness to let it evolve, with the example of using fabric and light and how much that lent to the sort of sensory impact of the project and so forth. And I also appreciate the thoughtfulness around the possibility of opening up a race dialogue in the community. And I'm wondering if your thought around that, and maybe I missed a piece of the story, but I'm wondering if it was that you saw that would happen organically and that was the intention, or were there kind of formal opportunities for conversation where you literally would bring people together in one of those spaces or in the public square and begin to facilitate some exchange around issues of history, issues about the slave trade, and what's happening in our time at this moment?
So I'll take this one. Oh, if you can. Sorry, trying to make sure you don't have an echo. That's a great question, Pam, and thank you for the compliment. Same to you, Emily. We appreciate curiosity. Curiosity is innately part of the project. So there have been, I'll give you an example of some of the things that have occurred in the vein in which you're talking. One is we had essentially an open house in one of our local areas here, the Carnegie Center for Literacy and Learning. And we did have a panel with, Nikki Finney and a few other folks to help address the crowd. We talked about the project, the significance of it. There was a gallery showing. And so, yeah, there was some great conversation there, as well as, there have been a few instances like that. There was also a sanctification ceremony. There was some news coverage, and we did it on the steps of the courthouse. And that was when there was this woeful lament by a incredible opera artist by the name of Cherise. And there were some readings and a few folks that represented the government, as well as, from the project that spoke. And there was a candle vigil. So those are some examples of ways in which the public can be engaged, and also there can be some conversation around the topic.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So there's a couple more questions in the chat. Cheryl Harry asked, and this is a great question, is there a traveling component of the exhibition?
Yes, there is. And actually, we just did a webinar, which Emily Moses can share, or we can, that talks about how to bring the project to your town. And mostly what we do is work with historians in whatever town is interested, like, and find out significant places that should be marked. And then we come to your town, we photograph it, and we have the pieces made and then install them. So yes, that's very much part of it. But one thing that I want to say in response to the question that was asked before about conversations is that, now I'm just me, but I've spent my life in the creation of image. And I don't know that we're going to be able to talk through everything in America. And so one of the ideas of this is that we actually utilize the power of art, like the foundation of Patrick's incredible photographs with this layering of history, poetry, accompanying it with, like what Cherise sang was Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. And to bring into the community the highest level of visual image and have those pieces stay there. So what we create in an area is a memorial. And I have to believe, or I hope to believe, that the actual power of art can affect people in certain ways that are very sub rosa. So I could say more, but I could talk forever about it. Anyway, that's it.
And we have one final question in the chat. From the artistic creation process side, do you have a source to suggest for printing on the diaphanous fabric?
We are using at first we started off with one supplier, and now we've moved to actually a company in Louisville that can create images for us that are 16 feet by 60 feet. So the company that we're working with right now is called USA Image Technology.
Okay, and that actually brings us to 3:50, and that is the end time for our session. Marshall, Marjorie, Patrick, any final word you would like to say to the group?
Just thank you for having us.
The one thing that I would say is anything that you learn that becomes a point of conversation that you can have with someone else, especially if they are of a different ethnicity than you, don't be afraid to have that conversation. And if you do, just remember, be understanding of the things that you don't understand.
So I just want to say thank you. This has been wonderful. It's been a wonderful chance for us to share this project that we love so much with all of you, and we're very grateful for the opportunity.
All right, thank you all so much. And that concludes our session. Thanks for coming today. I believe there's a break at this point, and the next sessions begin at 4 p.m. Is that right, Heather? All right, thanks everybody.